Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe, free of bullshit and full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS Marketing Show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. We are at VISTAGE's Executive Summit Pittsburgh for a special remote broadcast of the No BS Marketing Show. I'm here with Chuck Ganaris, a VISTAGE chair. He's been a guest on the podcast. Chuck, I wanted to ask you about the Harvard Business Review article that talks about the 4 behaviors of successful CEOs. The first one is about deciding with speed and conviction. And one point that was made was that high-performing CEOs understand that a wrong decision is often better than no decision at all. Sounds a little contrarian or maybe contradictory to make a wrong decision, but a wrong decision is often better than no decision at all. Your thoughts?
Well, I would just say this, given my experience of working with presidents and CEOs of businesses, one of the things that I've observed is that personality enters into it, right? Certain ones of us tend to be less comfortable with risk. Others of us are more comfortable with risk. And what I see is those a little more comfortable with risk are quick to move and make decisions, move forward. Sometimes might bite a little more risk off than they can chew, but frankly, they're the ones that will end up getting the triples and sometimes home runs whenever they take those steps. Whereas people who are wired to be a little more risk averse as a leader tend to be very slow and they hold off. And so they're lucky if they get a single, and occasionally they might get a double. And I definitely see the fact that if they took risk, more calculated risk, that they would move further ahead more rapidly. So my view would be, know yourself, become very self-aware, understand your personality preferences, and figure out how do I work with other people around me, part of my organization or partners, to help me decide, do I move or do I not move? Because I agree with the fact you don't want to be caught up in paralysis of analysis.
You talked about knowing your audience, and you and I are both huge practitioners and licensees of Predictive Index, and that plays a role in everything that a leader can do. And even the second behavior is about engaging with impact, and that's obviously my favorite one because it's all about communicating and building relationships with your key stakeholders and target audiences. Talk about that and maybe even how PI can help with that type of communication with key internal stakeholders like employees or even reaching your target audience.
So I go back and as I was thinking about this a bit, we were all focused a bit on, many leaders are focused on cultivating a clear vision for where we're taking the company, strategy, how we're going to get there, and a plan. But what it has to anchor all of that, right, is our understanding of the marketplace. How do we fit out in a marketplace? What does the market need right now? And how do we provide that in the form of a product or service that we can differentiate ourselves on, right? And that's where that impact comes along. If you can't become very clear about how you're differentiated, your brand identity, there's another word I would use to define that, then you really become just another person who's out there that says, hey, I can do these things. So I think when you're engaging with impact, it's about getting real clear about the value you can bring, what differentiates your business, and using that to be able to kind of set you apart from everybody else. And so therefore, messaging, how you deliver that to the market, how you deliver that to employees, attracts the kind of people that you want to be able to work with. That's my perspective on it.
Talk about how setbacks under that adapting to change can actually be an opportunity. The article talked about how setbacks can be an opportunity if you leverage them.
Yeah, I think that what it is that occasionally when we have a setback and things don't work out the way that we intended, our natural response sometimes could be triggered by fear. And fear is really not the friend of a leader in many respects because it kind of shuts down the ability to be creative and innovative and really to be able to think of other alternatives. Our biology is wired that way, and if we had more time, I'd talk more about it. But what I would say is this. I'd say that the key thing is that if you stay focused on the end state that you want to get to, you're clear about that vision, and you can find a why. Why is this important to you? Beyond making money, we all have a desire to want to be able to do things that create a profitable business for ourselves, but some meaning beyond making money that's really going to drive us, and then persevere. Continue to stay focused, very focused on that vision and strategy and plan for growth, I think that a setback, if you look at the setbacks that way, you can be more objective and be able to figure out what is the learning that you can pick out of that, how do I modify my approach just a little bit, and keep going at it. And I've seen many people maybe not be successful on the first time, sometimes not even on the second time, third or fourth or fifth time. But if you stay at it and you've got purpose and conviction and meaning behind what you're trying to do, you'll get there. You got to believe in yourself.
Chuck, you've been great when you were on the show. You talked about what VISTAGE is. Today, I want you to just give a brief answer. I know you have to get to your next speaking part. Why does VISTAGE Executive Summit Pittsburgh, why is it important?
I think that what is important about VISTAGE Executive Summit is that it's a day where we bring all of the members of the greater Pittsburgh community, and there's a couple of hundred plus that are here, together for a day to be able to connect with one another. We hear new ideas, new ways of thinking about things, just to deal with the stuff that you just talked about before. Because I've talked about this belief wheel concept before, right? Where you remember we have our beliefs drive our judgments drive our actions, and our actions drive results. When we're not getting the results that we need in our business or in our personal life, we got to change our actions. And we've got to be around trusted colleagues that can give us honest perspective, that don't have a vested interest. They're just interested in helping us to grow. And that's the power of the VISTAGE organization, right? Is that there's a number of members who are here committed to their own growth, committed to help each other. And that's what makes this so transformative, because we're here to help each other to do it. And this gives us a lot of different insights on new ways of thinking.
Chuck, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you again, Dave.
We're now with Dave Watson, the CEO of Phoenix Rehabilitation Healthcare. We're at the Executive Summit, VISTAGE Executive Summit, Pittsburgh. Dave, you and I have known each other for a while, and I was telling you how I wanted to ask you about this recent Harvard Business Review article that mentions the 4 behaviors of successful CEOs. One of them is deciding with speed and conviction, and one point was that high-performing CEOs understand that a wrong decision is often better than no decision at all. It sounds controversial. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, typically you run into so many new decision-making points in a day or a week, and I always have this sign on my desk that says, "Lord, grant me the wisdom to know when to shut up," because there's so many things you can't possibly figure them all out in any moment that they come up. But given the fact that you sit in a place where you know the company and you know where you're heading, once in a while one strikes you, and that has to be that instinctual gut level that you know you're working on all your gears, and without the information you know when to pursue. The rest of them, you just have to know when to politely say no thank you, and more no thank yous in my world work better than yeses.
One of the things that are the 4 behaviors is engaging with impact. And I know at Phoenix, you have something called the Phoenix Way. So when I read that in the HBR article, I thought of you, that he knows how to engage with impact. Talk about how you engage your key stakeholders, your target audience, your employees with impact, and talk about the Phoenix Way.
You know, it's funny that you say that one, because that was one of those ideas or thoughts or pitches that came to me by David Friedman, and looked at us and said, this would be a good idea. And when he explained it, I suddenly went, aha, this would be perfect for us, because it does fit us, it does have an impact on our employees, and it does differentiate us amongst the many physical therapy providers. So it was such an impact that everybody is still talking about it, especially the full rollout day that we did for 8 hours. I thought it would be boring. It was the most enlightening and engaging experience for all of our employees. So it was a great impact.
And the Phoenix Way is your cultural beliefs that are core to the company, and talk about how you communicate those on a regular basis.
You know, we consider ourselves, we live our culture and live our values, but unless you talk about them all the time. So we, each week, give an answer to each other of, when we get together, the first thing we're going to do is say something about that week's fundamentals. We have 20 of them. We lay them out 20 weeks in a row, and we all talk about one after another. But the funny thing about it is, as we write memos to each other or little points, we usually say one of our fundamentals to start the thing, because it's like, I need you to understand the why, which is one of our fundamentals, and then you go on to explain it, because it gives you an intro into almost every piece of informational or decisional making moment that you have to have.
Talk about another behavior outside of the four that you think of when you think of high-performing CEOs. It could be any behavior you think is needed as far as how they respond or something that's worked well for you.
I still think the value of a CEO is in praise, not in criticism. I think the value of a CEO at the top sends all the right signals. If you've got the framework for success, that you now recognize it in your people and division units or whoever, that you're able to say, and it works really well at a moment to be able to say, here is my moment of success. You guys really hit the ball out of the park today. Thank you. And that does more, I think, than a lot of memos, decision-making, and everything else. It's face-to-face, a smile, a positive note. They remember that more than almost anything.
That's Dave Watson, CEO of Phoenix Rehab, and we can hear the chimes because we are at VISTAGE's Executive Summit in Pittsburgh, and we both probably have to get back in the meeting. Thank you, Dave, for your wisdom.
And thank you for talking to me. It's always a pleasure, Dave.
I'm here at VISTAGE Executive Summit Pittsburgh with Lorianne Poutier, President and COO of IntegraCare Corporation. Lorianne, thanks for coming on the No BS Marketing Show.
Hi, Dave. Great to be here.
You and I were talking about that HBR, Harvard Business Review article, and it mentions the 4 behaviors of successful and high-performing CEOs. I've known you a long time, and you're one of them. So I want to talk about the first point, which is deciding with speed and conviction. In the article, it had a statement that I've asked a lot of people. It said, sometimes or even often, it's better to make a wrong decision than no decision at all. And we as humans are taught, afraid of mistakes, and people are afraid to say they're wrong. What do you think about that? That sometimes or even often, it's better to make a decision that might end up being wrong than no decision at all?
I would say I agree with that statement wholeheartedly, and I would say it's a sometimes kind of thing. But the reality is, if you're expecting to be competitive and you want an engaged workforce, they have to be able to see you taking a risk, making a mistake, assessing the mistake, talking about the mistake, and that there are, although there may be ramifications, that you're willing to kind of tighten your bootstraps and just move forward. Otherwise, what you're going to have is just a bunch of followers, no real innovation unless it comes from you, and no organization is going to survive that way. So obviously you don't want to make a big mistake. You have to assess when you're willing to, look at the science related to a situation and what your gut's telling you, and you really have to balance those two things. But I would say there are those times that then you just have to take the plunge, and sometimes it's a mistake, and you learn from it and educate from it, and you move on.
I've been fortunate to know you a long time, and from day one of IntegraCare, and you have lived a mission of a 3-dimensional focus on your employees first, and then your residents and family members. And that ties to the second point in the Harvard Business Review article about how important it is for high-performing CEOs to engage with impact, to reach and influence their key target audiences. Talk about that, because I think that's something IntegraCare is a model at.
That is actually, in our industry, the key to success, and for me, one of the primary motivators of my role in the organization. And I would say the most important thing is having what I call adaptive leadership, which is really getting to know people on a personal level. And now maybe you can't know every single team member, but getting to know the team member as even a group where you understand where they're coming from, what their wins are, what their losses are, what their life struggles are, and that when you're tailoring your employee experience, you're thinking of it with those things in mind, and then you're soliciting, well, hey, how's that working for you? What are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? And that you're visible, standing behind those things that you've done, so that if there's something that's not right, then they never see you again and you're hiding. So then the perception is, well, they put this in place, it was a big failure, and now they're hiding from us. So our industry is a very high turnover industry, and everybody wants that personal connection, and they want to feel like they're a part of the bigger picture. So engaging adaptively is the key to that.
You segue awesomely into the third one, which is adapting to change. In the article, it talked about how setbacks become opportunities. We don't want to comment on that, about setbacks and leveraging them?
Setbacks are an opportunity to reflect. You always want to move forward, but I think for us, knowing where you've been is really so key to knowing where you're going. And so the setbacks They're telling you where you've been, maybe not always so positively, but when you're doing great and then you have this major setback, it causes a regrouping, maybe a study of the numbers, a discussion with multiple groups of team members in the organization to learn something that maybe you've lost sight of or a new trend that you've missed to help you basically build your plan to move forward. So that without those setbacks, sometimes we get a little, falsely arrogant about, gee, we're doing great, isn't this great? And I don't think anybody tends to be that way, but it's just what happens to us as people. This kind of keeps us grounded in our roots, using the foundation to then move us forward, as opposed to just thinking, oh, that was yesterday, this is today, and we just march on.
Probably the most, easily understood of the 4 traits of high-performing leaders mentioned in this Harvard Business Review article this month is delivering reliably. Now, it's easy to understand what that means, but in practice, it's harder. And I know with your business, what you talk to me about a lot is how with your team you have to focus on those employees because your industry has a high turnover. Talk about how you can deliver reliably in a difficult industry that's challenging.
I believe it's several things. Number one, delivering reliably relies on having information from the person on the front line so that when you're devising tools, systems, processes, the service experience, you're doing it from a point of reality versus from the top down where maybe you have a huge blind spot. So that's number one. But number two is practice, practice, practice. I think the thing that had early in my career that was the most frustrating to me was that we would create a great tool, system, and process, roll it out well, and then I'd be looking at it 3 or 4 months down the road and see, hey, it's falling off already. So what I have learned is if it's meaningful, it's yours forever. So as a leader, you have to have a meaningful routine that has a touch point with all those tool, systems, and processes, and that provides feedback up and down to keep them meaningful, then to keep them in place and have them become a productive part of the organization. So it is simply not moving on to the next program, but incorporating your routine for the programs that are in place and then moving on to the next program.
That's some great no BS advice for any of our listeners. So we're here at VISTAGE Executive Summit Pittsburgh. What are your thoughts about what you gained from this?
It's like this is great because it's a cross-section of industries here, so you get to network with a fair number of people who may have differing perspectives, who more than likely have differing perspectives. But like any other conference, I always look at it and say if there are 3 good takeaways that I am committed to implementing and I actually follow through and do that, which is also a part of being a VISTAGE member, accountability, then the day was worth the time, especially when you're thinking of, as we all do, the 800 other things that really, I shouldn't give this day up. I should be doing these other things. And so I make it a point to make the day worth it by implementing some of the takeaways.
Thank you, Lori-Ann, for being on the No BS Marketing Show.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me.
The No BS Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. That's audibletrial.com/nobs. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. I've been a big Audible user for years because Audible and podcasts enable you to multitask and drive down the road and listen to a book, get caught up, whatever. This episode of the No BS Marketing Show includes interviews from VISTAGE Executive Summit Pittsburgh. I had the chance to talk to leaders about a recent Harvard Business Review article that outlined the 4 behaviors of high-performing CEOs and successful leaders. Here's my interview with Brian Baum of Baum Consulting and Dave Myers of ElpsControls.com. Brian, we're asking CEOs here at VISTAGE's Pittsburgh Executive Summit. We're asking them to talk about the 4 behaviors of high-performing CEOs, a recent article in Harvard Business Review. And deciding with speed and conviction was one of the 4 behaviors. So one point that was made under that was that high-performing CEOs understand that a wrong decision is often better than no decision at all. What are your thoughts about that or about the behavior of speed and conviction?
Well, I think it's a 2-part question, so I'll answer it in such. So as far as speed and conviction, I think that whenever you realize that you have gathered as much information as necessary to get to that next step, whether it's, you need 70%, 80%, 90%, whatever each person uniquely needs, you got to make that decision, because any more you're just going to paralyze yourself. Essentially, you're going to keep searching for this silver bullet that really doesn't exist, and you're not really going to know about that until you start seeing what are the ramifications, what are the consequences to that first decision. So as far as making the wrong decision, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, you're going to get valuable data points back to you that will help you either pivot to what the correct decision is, or completely scale back everything and start from scratch and realize that we just made the wrong call and now we need to start all over.
Brian, with that article about the 4 behaviors, another one was engaging for impact and communicating to key stakeholders. Can you talk about how important that is to you and your company?
Absolutely. It's a team environment, and if you're not communicating effectively to that team and you're not engaging them in the really important decisions, then they could go rogue, they could do something incorrect, and you were thinking the entire time, well, this was so obvious. But if you're not actively making sure that they're engaged in the process, engaged in where the company's moving to, and understands what the messaging needs to be and how to get it out to the right people, the entire company is going to fail and falter. So I think you always have to engage your people, make sure that everyone's on the same page, and confident with the direction moving forward. And if anyone isn't, you need to address that right from the very beginning. I mean, that's a huge red flag that needs to be, settled very quickly. Otherwise, you can get, 4 or 5 steps down the road and realize that one person's kind of dragging their feet because they're really not agreeing with the direction and they're not engaged in that entire process.
One of the other ones was adapting to change. Talk about how you personally have dealt with setbacks and how you turn that into a positive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a young executive. I mean, that's probably one of the hardest things that I have to overcome on a daily basis. I'm working with very successful CEOs and entrepreneurs that are 10, 15, 20 years my senior. And from an early age, I knew that this was going to be the path that I needed to take. So what I did to counteract that is I just started building a network via interviewing them. I just said, look, tell me what you did to become so successful. Let me start meeting them in a social manner and then slowly transition that into, well, how can my business help your business? And that was probably the biggest thing that we needed to overcome. But as it pertains to the speed of change, right? Adapting to change. I mean, through that, I've realized that there were skills that I didn't have that I needed to go and learn very quickly. I realized that I had to be steadfast, and even in the bad moments, realize I'm moving and just trust the process. I'm moving in the right direction. But as soon as sometimes I've realized that it's just not working, I'll stop on a dime and pivot and change to a different direction. I have no issue saying that I was wrong about something. I have no issue admitting to my faults. I do have an issue of going too far down a path without correcting it.
We are at VISTAGE's Executive Summit in Pittsburgh with Brian Baum, and we're going to talk about the HBR article about 4 behaviors of high-performing CEOs. The 4th one is delivering reliably, and I think we all strive to do that, but what are your thoughts on how often it happens?
It's an interesting time in both my life and our business's life, because deliverables and what are you actually getting for what they're paying for it's a huge issue. Prices and fees in our industry and across the country are under attack right now by customers, by businesses, and there needs to be strong deliverables and a strong process in place to prove to the client that what they're paying for, they're actually getting back tenfold in value. So you need to be able to deliver. And unfortunately, especially in my industry, in helping these entrepreneurs with succession, with exit strategies, a lot of people talk about this, but they're really just looking after a product sale, whether it's insurance or a legal sale or a tax sale. And they're not looking at this as a total big picture view, and understanding that there's many different areas that are going to impact this one decision that they make. And being able to deliver on something like that, I've seen it, as poorly as 20% can actually do it. It's a very low percentage, and I might be being very generous on that. And I think that if you look across the board, so many people are so focused on, what we're going to say to a prospect, how we're going to get them in, how are we going to get them to pay us. And the really, really good ones take that a step further and say, well, let's make sure that we have a really strong process for once they're here, they're going to, scream from the top of Everest how good we are because we delivered on every single little thing that we talked about.
Brian, last question. You've had the chance to work with a number of successful business leaders with their businesses through your company. What's another behavior of a high-performing CEO other than the four that we've talked about that Harvard Business Review identified?
I would say it is strategic focus. And what I mean by that is the really, really great CEOs, they never sacrifice the important for the urgent. And what I mean by that is they take care of the immediate need, but then they're never forgetting that there's really important things that need to get done incrementally. So the really, really great ones have strategic focus. They understand when it needs to be, okay, I need to jump in right this second because if this urgent thing isn't taken care of quickly, it's going to be really bad for the company. But they know when to come out of that and back into that strategic, what's the really important thing for my company to be here 10 years, 15 years, 50 years, 100 years into the future. The really, really great ones have that strategic focus and understand that ebb and flow.
Thanks so much for your time, Brian, and hope you enjoy the rest of VISTAGE Executive Summit, Pittsburgh.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave, what I have loved getting to know you over the years is that I see you as a guy who had a vision and a big idea, and you made it happen. So this HBR, Harvard Business Review article that I keep referencing today's interviewees talks about how being decisive quickly and making decisions is important, and sometimes being willing to be wrong rather than making no decision. I think you're a guy that's probably lived that. So what are your thoughts on that?
I probably have a different perspective than you guys. I've always believed that a business partner is a good thing, and I've never wanted to own and run my own company by myself. My partners over the years have been, my current partner, Ken Seifert, is an engineer. He's methodical. He thinks carefully about every decision. I run into him and I say, Ken, I think we need to do this. And he stares at me with a blank look on his face and says, you're crazy. We can't do that. And I've learned through Predictive Index that you can't run into Ken and ask him that question. He's he's wired. He wants to think about that answer. So I should tell him in an email on a Friday, I'm thinking about providing free freight. So he's not under pressure to tell me I'm nuts right away. He's got the weekend to think about it and come back and say, Dave, that was a stupid decision. We're not going to do that, and here's why. So I've always had the luxury of having a break that my personality, my PI doesn't have. But even I heard Chuck Canaris' interview earlier. Chuck's absolutely right. A serial entrepreneur or someone who's a good leader isn't affected by that bad decision. We just bounce back and go, oh, well, I'll do this instead. We don't suffer over it and say, oh my gosh, how stupid could I have been? That was a terrible decision. We quickly analyze it after we've made the decision, say that was dumb, and then just jump back and do something different. And we dust ourselves off, and it was easy. Other people can't dust themselves off because the dust is so thick. They're so upset with. We don't do that. We think we're always right, and when we're wrong, we were still right, and we'll just do it this way.
And so you see setbacks as an opportunity to learn.
Absolutely.
So that's two of the behaviors. The third behavior is the engaging with impact. And I tell every single person I say this to, so it's going to be on the podcast like 7 times. I love this one because it's what I'm passionate about, is communicating with key stakeholders, both internally and externally. How do you feel about engaging with impact?
I've always been a very passionate person about what I believe in. Of course, I believe in my business. I'm always told by other businesses other manufacturers we represent or the customers we sell to, they're caught up in my passion. They believe in what I believe in because I have a natural way of expressing how much I care about this or this product or this process, whatever it is. And I'm able to tell a story and engage them in it that makes them feel they want that. And that was something I think I was born with.
The fourth behavior of high-performing CEOs is they deliver reliably. So that's basically the premise your company's built on. So tell me about your thoughts on delivering reliably.
Yeah, I learned this from Steve Jobs. When he had those meetings where he would introduce new products, he always ended up the session by saying, "And it's available today." Like he never said it's something we're working on and next year you're going to see this. He was like, "And it's available now." So his deliverability was unparalleled up till he was doing this. I was not used to hearing businesses say that. I'm not reliable at all. My personality is the exact opposite. I was late for this meeting. But I have a team of people that believes in what we're doing passionately, and they're engineers, they're customer support people that are really good at their job, and they're very reliable. And they tease me and they make up for my shortcomings. I've been able to create the culture in our company where reliability is critical, even though the leader doesn't seem to know what he's doing.
Again, he's a humble man because you're the vision guy and you are also passionate about the culture at your company and you care about your employees and a lot of things in the community. We're here at VISTAGE Executive Summit Pittsburgh. Tell me why you see value in this event every year.
I'm not a group, I don't join groups. In the past, when I met Chuck Canaris, he said, "Give it a try, I think you're going to like it." I did, and it's the only group I belong to. I really like it. The members in my particular group are passionate business guys, all different types and different personalities, but we've connected. I've been in it 6 years, I think. Everybody is pulling for everybody. Everybody has a connection, and coming to the big meeting here, I always love the speakers. I engage with the speakers very easily. I like the talks, but it's cool to see that I'm part of a community that's all pulling in the same direction. We're trying to grow businesses to help the world.
Thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show. Remember, your reviews of the show and your feedback make the difference and drive the content. So I want to thank you in advance for going to your favorite podcast place and posting a review of the show or reaching out to me to give me ideas for guests and content. Also, visit masssolutions.biz for show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources, including signing up for the No BS Marketing email newsletter. You'll receive timely, valuable ideas to improve your marketing and transform your message. To sign up, visit masssolutions.biz, and to reach me, it's Dave at masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions.